Greetings everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on Evolution of Mural Art in India. The lecture deals with the period of India's greatest cultural fluorescence, the addition of many iconographic styles from Ajanta to Bagh caves and vice versa, due to movement of skilled workers and craftsmen between these two Buddhist sites. Many figures were added or deleted depending on the contemporary beliefs, practices and ideas, as well as depending on the local condition of rocks at both the sites. The art and architecture of these sites reflects India's great material culture that had been evolving since long. The Ajanta paintings are not just a milestone in the history of development of world art, but they also convey unique insights about the life of ancient Indians as well as their cultural beliefs, practices, values, lifestyle, and so on and so forth. The history of Indian mural painting starts in ancient and early medieval times from the 2nd century BCE to 8th to 10th century CE. There are more than 20 locations around India containing murals from this period, mainly natural caves as well as in rock-cut chambers. Now, before we proceed further, let us discuss as to what a mural art is. So, a mural is any piece of artwork painted or applied directly on a wall ceiling or other permanent surfaces. So, any piece of art which is developed either on a wall surface or ceiling or any other permanent surface. A distinguishing characteristic of mural painting is that the architectural elements of the given space are harmoniously incorporated into the picture. So, if we talk about Ajanta cave art, in earlier times, monks headed to the Ajanta caves in Aurangabad, Maharashtra for their monsoon retreats, while merchants and pilgrims also made stopovers to probably rest there. The caves were abandoned in 5th century CE and were not discovered until almost 1400 years later. So, several civilizations, dynasties came and went, and eventually very thick undergrowth, bushes, etc. developed, and they completely camouflaged the caves. Finally, it was in 1819 that a colonial British officer named Captain John Smith, who was on a tiger hunting mission, probably stumbled upon these caves. And with the rediscovery of the splendor of Ajanta, very soon news spread and attempts were made to kind of bring Ajanta in the limelight again, as well as to unearth its hidden treasures, that was the fine mural paintings, and soon it became known to the world that how this entire area had been developed beautifully by these very special artists. So, if we trace the discovery of Ajanta caves, then one finds out that the Ajanta caves were almost 30 spellbinding Buddhist prayer halls and monasteries carved into a horseshoe-shaped rock face in a mountainous region of India's Maharashtra state. And they are located around 280 miles east of Mumbai, and they were accidentally discovered in 1819. So, before 1819, there was no knowledge per se about this site. A large number of experts who worked and surveyed about the art of Ajanta also kind of indicated that how this entire site had gone through major changes as well as damages in due course of time. One of the few known surviving paintings to have left Ajanta intact is in the care of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. It had been sold in 1924 for £1,000 at Sotheby's in London. The government of Bombay commissioned several new copies of the Ajanta cave paintings as early as 1872 from John Griffiths, who at that time was principal of the Bombay School of Art. Griffiths and several of his followers, students, etc., produced as many as 300 paintings, only for a third to go up in flames at London's Imperial Institute in 1885. So that again was a huge loss. Finally, in 1909, it was Lady Harrington, a suffragette and art patron, who began further copies. Development of further copies was encouraged by her with the help from Calcutta School of Art. And from late 1920s, we see that the Indian art historian Ghulam Yazdani, he also made a comprehensive photographic survey of the art of Ajanta, and this came to be published in almost 4 volumes starting from 1930 to 1955. So these are some of the sources which kind of tell us about the varied art forms that developed in these caves. For the best maintenance of the famous Ajanta caves, a meticulous restoration project was also undertaken. The survey was conducted, and in due course of time, several questions emerged as to how such meticulous planning of painting was undertaken in such dark recesses of rock carved prayer halls and monasteries. So this probably required a very meticulous planning as well as calculation as well as knowledge about how to conduct such artistic activities in these dark recesses. Several architects, masons, sculptors and painters must have been at work from around 460 to between the time span during which these paintings developed, and also they cannot be ascribed to a single period, single dynasty or any specific period. So probably they evolved over several decades and also centuries, and also the very fact that merchants and courtiers during the reign of Vakataka dynasty Emperor Harisena were playing a very important role in overall patronizing of such artistic activities, in addition to a very active role played by Harisena, cannot be overlooked. The Vakataka Empire was a dynasty from the Indian subcontinent that had originated from Deccan in mid-3rd century CE. A number of paintings, while they have been found on the walls, but what is interesting is that even the ceilings of these caves are not without these paintings, and that is what makes this art even more adventurous, as well as it kind of distinguishes from other simplified forms of painting, as you can see in this visual that is being shared on the screen. This shows the entire ceiling being painted in the similar fashion as were the walls. Then, in addition to this ceiling art, one also comes across several panels that were filled with decorative motifs which were framed by smaller rectangles or squares, and how there was a representation of different floral forms or fruits or some other motif. Again, the element of decoration was highlighted through these panels. As you can see, closer view of one of such panels where there is a beautiful depiction of some flowers as well as birds. and in between these two figures there is a geometrical design to give it some element of harmony. Then another visual of one of the panel is that of animals and birds. You can look at the way the colors were used, and there was also an importance that was given to highlighting the painting. The same technique which even modern artists use, that they have to have a combination of dark and light, shadow and dark colors in their composition, so as to the entire composition is not blurred or it does not become invisible. So the same kind of use of white color in addition to other colors was used centuries ago as well. This particular visual is from Cave 1. Again, the form and shape of elephant captures the movement, the step forward, and it's not a static kind of a figure. Then another interesting image was that of reclining bulls, which is from Cave 17. Then from Cave 2, you can see another interesting visual. Again, this is a different kind of a visual altogether, which is not about women or about dancing girls or about apsaras. So there was lot of diversity in the way themes were picked up, and this particular visual shows a king in his harem, and this again is a more secular theme. So it is not as if all the paintings were about Buddhism or related to religious philosophy. So it was also about life, it was also about leisure, it was also about time spent together. And in this particular visual, one can see friends enjoying each other's company with wine. Now in this visual, you can see, which is from Cave 1 and 26, there is some kind of a three-dimensional effect which is visible in these paintings, and this also deals with the kind of angular images that were being projected, so that there is an impression of three-dimensional effect. It was finally in 1983 that Ajanta caves were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site standard, and John Smith, who was a young British cavalry officer, while he was in a tiger hunt, that he spotted the mouth of a cave which was much high above the Waghora river, which could have been man-made. So once Smith entered the cave, and he encountered a great vaulted and colonnaded hall, and the wall of this hall were covered with faded paintings. Beneath a dome, a timeless praying Buddha fronted a mound-like shrine or a stupa. So having encountered all this, then there was no going back. Ajanta caves are comprised of the following structures. So one is the prayer hall, that was the Chaitya Grihas, and then there were monasteries or the Viharas. These have been cut and carved from solid rock between the 1st and 2nd centuries BC. So you see the evolution of this structure started much earlier, and 25 monasteries or the lodgings of monks, the residential areas of monks were carved around 5th century CE. Now on your screen, what is being displayed are the Chaitya Griha paintings, and these Chaitya Griha paintings probably belong to Hinayana sect. These paintings in the oldest cave in Ajanta, that is Cave 10, date back to around 2nd century BCE and also probably between 4th century CE. A Chaitya Griha particularly belongs to the Hinayana sect of Buddhism. If we talk about the subject matters in the art of Ajanta, then we can say, of course, Buddhism was an important subject, and since these paintings were found in the dark recesses of caves and interiors of temples, these murals have not been clearly photographed or could not be seen by many. So, Ajanta caves are crowded by a large number of sculptures of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, that is, and also a number of Buddhist monks. A very interesting representation along with the Buddhist themes is that of representation of princes and princesses. So, between the images of the Buddha, we do have figurative representations of royalty as well. They all are projected in a very sensuous manner. Each and every one of these representations appear to be glamorous. And some other subject matters that one can talk about are of course flora, fauna, palaces, jewelry, ornaments, then scenes of divine beauty, and the artists of Ajanta showed the life in all its mortal richness and diversity. So, Indian artists tried to capture a joyous vision of natural existence as well as the harmony of divine beauty, as is also clearly shown in the choice of colors as well as themes. If we talk about the influences which one can trace in these art forms, they show some kind of affinity also to classical Greek art. This was again not a coincidence, but there are evidences of a Greco-Indian culture that had spread from 4th century BCE onwards as a result of expeditions of Alexander. It stretched through Hellenistic kingdoms and trade routes from Mediterranean to Persia, Afghanistan, India, and with Ajanta along the way to distant China and Japan. And we have already discussed as to how these Greco-Roman styles also influenced several sculptural traditions in India, specifically Gandhara art. Now, coming to the characteristics of Ajanta cave paintings, they are best known for the beauty of Buddha's image, illuminating statues of the praying Buddha, the spellbinding architecture, and also the compelling beauty of the wall paintings, which are related both to the secular as well as to the religious theme. All these seem to be portrayed in a very interesting manner, and they have also revealed the use of intense colors in the painting. Many portraits depicted the mastery of the art of the craftsmen, of the artists, and the use of subtle colors as well as the importance of perspective, shading, three-dimensional techniques, as well as usage of bright stones, especially lapis lazuli, which was specially brought from Afghanistan. So, Chaitya Grihas and Viharas of Ajanta developed as Buddhist caves, and by the time of Vakataka Empire, the king became a major patron of Buddhist art forms, and during his reign, till the fall of his empire, the Ajanta caves became a place of contemplation as well as constant evolution and development of artwork. The artists painted by using precise colors in the dark recesses of these rock carved prayer halls as well as monasteries, and most of the work, interestingly, is found in the darkest areas of these caves. The idea being that when sunlight struck the paintings and sculpture, it illuminated them. So, the kind of divine feeling that these artworks must have inspired can be well imagined. Walls of the Ajanta caves are decorated with several paintings depicting the pomp and splendor of the royal courts as well as the romance, singing, dancing. So, it was basically life in its celebratory mode as well as life in a meditative mode, and some of them also depicted the world of nature, vegetation, flowers, animals and birds. Some of the visuals have already been shared, and many themes were also imported from Buddha's life as well as several Jataka stories, and most of the scenes were not like static scenes, or it was not as if something still was being shown, because the scenes were full of movement, full of action and also full of vitality. Most of the figures were drawn with great skill and precision, and there was an attempt to convey a human appeal, and by depicting all forms of life. So there it was not as if only a woman's body was being showcased or only a Buddha was being showcased, but rather all forms of life, flora, fauna, humans, divinities, secular life, royalty. So the paintings, one can say, gave a fuller picture of real life, and soon this style spread to Central Asia and is also evident in wall paintings and in paintings on wooden panels which developed elsewhere. And this tradition also later on spread to Sri Lanka, and further on it also evolved as the art of book illumination, which continued especially in several Jain texts. The main colors, if one talks about, that were used in these paintings were red ochre, that was used on a large scale, in addition to yellow ochre, brown ochre, then lamp black, white and lapis lazuli. Now it is also interesting to know as to from where these colors were being made. So the green was made by mixing lapis lazuli with Indian yellow ochre, and all the characters were bright and multicolored but were never repeated, again which is a fundamental concept in Indian art. Ceilings, walls and pilasters were mostly covered with overlapping figures which were brought to life by the artists with strong and contrasting colors. Again, a principle that is followed even in modern painting. The painting techniques at Ajanta were similar to European fresco technique. The primary difference was that the layer of plaster was dry when it was painted. So if we talk about the different stages, then firstly a rough plaster of clay was applied, then cow dung and rice husks were pressed on the rough cave walls. This was then coated with lime juice in order to create a smooth working surface. So there was gentleness, kindness, generosity, love and warmth in most of the painted figures, and the faces and gestures also were harmonized with the beauty and gentleness that was emanating from within, as you can see in this visual that is being shared with you on the screen. Now, having discussed with you important features of Ajanta art form, one can say that there was not one style that was developing, there were varied styles, varied themes that were developing, and probably the discussion would go on. Thank you.